And that was my biggest problem all semester. Literally up to my presentation, every time I presented to my professor, they would always tell me, okay, you got it, but like you need to make this understandable. They really couldn't understand exactly up to the presentation day.
Subscribe to BlessedArch for your dose of art, architecture, and design, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Hey yo guys, welcome back to BlessedArch. Welcome back to a brand new series. Today on this channel, I am introducing Thesis Showcase. Now, the intent behind this series is so that people from all over the world can come here and present their work, and you and I can learn from them. So we'll not only look at the design, look at their ideas, look at their concepts, not just that, we will ask some more questions about how they chose the topic, the technical aspects, the details, the softwares, everything. So basically, this whole series is curated in a way that it can help inspire you and answer some of your questions as well. So I hope you like this series, and as always, after watching it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, so for episode 1, we have with us Matheus. He recently graduated from Florida International University with a master's in architecture. His final thesis project was called Mnemonic Realities. Now, I could tell you briefly about the project before we start, but I have a better idea. Now, Matheus' final presentation came out in the form of a video. So before we dive deep into conversation with Matheus trying to understand his project, let me show you his final output.
I've been waiting for this moment for the past 5 years. The day that I will go on stage, present my master thesis, and graduate with a master's in architecture, ready to join the world of building worlds. However excited, the research that I came across in the past year showed me that no matter what I presented to the jury, only a few of them would remember, and most of them would not remember my presentation or even who I was. And a possible intensifier for that might be the fact that I was not presenting on a physical stage, but everyone was watching this through a computer screen, Zoom, we've been through this. And what research has pointed out over and over again is that there's a huge connection between the way we perceive the physical space and the way we make memories. So the focus of my research was to understand how we perceive the physical space, how we make memories, and then how can we apply these neuroscientific ideas with the technology available to propose a different way of perceiving the physical world, and therefore different variations of what we call reality. And it's important to note that this relationship between physical space and memories is not new to neuroscience. Back in ancient Greece, Cicero was already talking about the story of Simonides and the technique of a memory palace, a technique for remembering things by associating ideas with spaces. And we see similar ideas in the Renaissance with Giulio Camillo, the proposal of the memory theater, and then Bruno with the memory wheel. And even though all of these are different proposals, different models, they all have loci, which is a space, and imaginis, which is an image, an idea. And yes, these techniques are useful. People use it up to this day to memorize decks of cards or thousands of digits of pi. But all of these spaces are in the mind. So how can we walk into one of these rooms? How can we inhabit then a memory palace? Hi, welcome to my room. This is going to be the subject space where I experiment with perception and I try to prototype a way of augmenting my memories into how I interpret and experience the space. And the prototype is split into 3 main parts. But for you to understand how we can augment perception, we need to understand what neuroscience tells us about that. And in a very simple way, as light bounces on objects and hit your retina, it gets converted into electrical signals and sent to the thalamus. And then these electrical signals with the visual information get sent to the primary visual cortex. From there, the information flows mainly 2 ways. The dorsal stream, processing where things are, the location, position, motion, and the ventral stream, which processes what the objects are. So where and what, almost like loci and imaginis. The interesting thing is that the primary visual cortex is always telling the thalamus what it thinks it sees, polluting the visual stream with preconceived ideas and what it wants to believe. And that is why some scientists are arguing that actually we're not perceiving the world, we're constantly generating it. So if the brain is already augmenting itself with preconceived ideas and memories, how can we then create an external way of processing that information and giving it back to the eye? So a prototype for doing that outside of the brain would be collecting the light before it hits the eye, then processing externally to understand position of things. And when choosing a memory from a dataset, we can then change the perception of objects and return this light to be perceived by the human eyes. And now that we got these concepts out of the way, allow me to show the 3 parts necessary to make this a reality. first step is going to be creating a synthetic space, which is going to be a digital version of interpreting the position of objects using a tool called Photogrammetry, which is familiar to most of you. But in case you don't know, Photogrammetry is able to collect 2D frames of the room, align those images, understand perspective and position to reconstruct a three-dimensional model of the space, and then deliver it in the form of a point cloud. But the interesting thing is, once we align this digital model with the physical space, we're able to perceive the synthetic model while touching and interacting with the physical world. And imagine all the things that we can do with this. It gives us the freedom to change what we see. And we can modify each of the points of light in space, taking away the control of what we can perceive. And perhaps we can even externalize our eye's ability to focus and place it on an object so we can bring it wherever we want to understand the space. But the second part is about how to modify these points according to a memory. This is the Ivy house, the house that I grew up in Brazil and the context in which I made a lot of my childhood memories. And this is what AI thinks my house is if I try to describe it to it. And a system for capturing the essence of a memory would be if your phone records a couple of shots when you're experiencing something. An image-to-text neural network is able to write sentences describing what it thinks the image is. And in this case, I'm using a Microsoft-developed model called Seeing AI. Then we can feed the sentences to a text-to-image neural network. And in this case, I'm using Clip by OpenAI. And what this model does is generate thousands of variations of a room made of the characteristics that AI thought my house was. And using a model like Psychogans, we can train all the pictures of the room to apply the patterns recognized by the generated Ivy rooms, creating building blocks for reconstructing the room, but only perceived with the memories. So finally, the step 3 is reconstructing the 3D model based on this augmented perception. Then aligning again with the physical space so we can create variations of how we interpret and experience the environment around us. And once we have enough variations, we can use mirrors as portals to access and explore the different realities. Because mirrors are already a way of viewing the world from a different perspective. And we can transform the 4 walls of this room into a tower of multiple levels of spaces that we can explore. And this is a preliminary prototype done by someone who's not trained in neuroscience or computer science, but using the available research and technological tools to question what's the future of architectural spaces. Because we already live in a world made of data, and it's only a matter of time for AR and VR technologies to be so part of our lives that this is normal. And if you think that anything that I've showed here could have been done better, great. Honestly, text me, DM me. Let's collaborate. Let's build the future.
Okay, so what you just watched was the final output that Matheus had made for his thesis. Don't worry if you didn't understand it all, we'll be going over the whole video part by part in the conversation to come. So without further wait, let's go to Matheus and understand everything behind his project. Now, before we start the interview, I just wanted to let you know that BlessedArch is on Patreon. Once you become a patron, you not only get access to bonus videos, like the extended conversation from this video as well, but you will help support BlessedArch and make the community bigger and more connected with people all over the world. So do consider supporting. The link is in the description below. Now, let's start our conversation. Hey Matheus, it's great to connect with you. I saw your thesis video, the video that you had put up on your profile. I remember seeing that, and I just remember, I want to know more about this. I want to sort of dissect it, and that is why having you here, having you talk to me about it, sort of helping me dissect it, it's really amazing, and thank you for taking out the time.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, for sure.
As the video starts, you mention the connection between how you perceive a physical space and memory. So let's talk a little bit about that, and also I want to know why you chose this topic.
Okay, there's 2 questions here. First, going to why I chose this topic. In the past 3 decades, neuroscience learned so much about the brain that changed whole industries. And in these 3 decades, neuroscientists, sociologists, and phenomenologists all agree that the environment is a big factor in how we develop our cognition and how we actually behave. So at the same time that this is happening in the past 3 decades, architecture has not necessarily looked full on board to these subjects. And if you look, for example, what's been going on in the past 3 decades in architecture, even though there is starting to be a push towards neuroscience and how we actually behave, there is still a big disconnect, and a lot of people are still asking the brick what he wants, you know? So this is one of the big pushes when I started looking at people like Anu Seth and Donald Hoffman and all of these big neuroscientists that are coming up with these conversations and theories and talking to the public in a language that we finally understand. And then how to merge these different disciplines. So at the same time that we're learning about the brain, how can we build for the brain? How can we interact many different worlds into design? That's one of the reasons. Another thing is quarantine. We were stuck in one place for so long, and I feel like the whole world learned to see your houses through different eyes. So part of the project took on this idea of how can I expand my perception of space and have so many different rooms within my quarantine walls.
So then you go on to talk about a memory palace and how the idea of it was conceived back in ancient Greece. So I had heard about memory palaces before, but it's through Sherlock.
Get out, I need to go to my mind palace.
I think a lot of people have just heard it through that. But you go on to talk about two things in particular, the loci and the imagine. So first talk to me about the concept of a memory palace and what really is the importance of the loci and the imagine.
Well, Cicero was talking about it, right, in ancient Greece, and he explains the story of Simonides, and it's actually an interesting story. Simonides was a poet, and back then when you couldn't really, hire a DJ or a music player, you would hire a poet to come to your banquet. So basically, Simonides was there to perform his poem, and he devoted the poem that he made for the host and for the gods. So then the host of the banquet, when he went to pay him, he was like, okay, I'm gonna only pay you half, and then you can ask the gods then for the other half. Super sass. And then what happened is someone called Simonides saying that someone was asking for him at the door of the palace. And Simonides got out of the room, and when he got to the door, there was no one there, no one asking for him. Right at the moment that he left the palace banquet, the roof collapsed and killed everyone inside. That's why they talk about, that was the payment from the gods, they saved his life. The interesting thing is the roof collapsed on everyone, and their bodies were so unrecognizable that no one could tell who was who. But Simonides was able to bring each family member to their deceived relatives by associating the position that they were in the palace with the memories that he had. So that's when they started associating, and that's why we call it the memory palace, because of this association of space with the episodic memory of what was going on, and he was able to identify who is who. And that's when it started talking about this, and the similar models of memory techniques, mnemonic techniques, happen throughout history. But the idea of the memory palace is that you can think of a place that you know very well, like your house, and you use that space as a list, literally a list, an ordered list, where you're gonna place each item in your head. So let's say I entered through the door, and I know I have my 3D printer, my desk, my computer, and a shoe rack, right? I have that clear in my mind because I'm so used to the space. So then when I have to remember a list of things, I picture myself either placing those things in that location or making associations. So what they talk about is the crazier the association, the better. So, if I need to buy Ben and Jerry's for my mom, ice cream, I need to buy ice cream for my mom, I would first, as I enter the door, I would think of the 3D printers, pouring ice cream onto the 3D printers, something that really messes with you. But then if you do that to every item in the room in your head, that means that you're going to remember all of these actions visually. And then you're going to remember the list of things that you have to do or you have to remember. And that's the general idea of the memory palace. So Loki is literally a place.
Beg your pardon.
And in this case, if you're using your house as a location where you're going to place objects in your mind, that would be the Loki. And then imaginis refers to an image, but it means an association. It's the visual representation of what you want to learn or what you want to remember. So in the case, Loki would be my house where the 3D printer is, and then Imaginis would be, the ice cream pouring to represent that I need to buy that specific ice cream. Honestly, people do remember decks and decks of cards. Have you seen those videos of people? They can look at a sheet of numbers for like 10 minutes, and then they can tell every number in order. And most people doing that, they're using mnemonic techniques like the memory palace to store that and then retrieve when they need it.
So then you take us to, let's say, the site of your project, which is your room. So the first thing I want to know is why your room? Why that space?
Okay, there are mainly two reasons. One is, quarantine. I've been over 400 years, not 400 years, 400 days, 400 days inside this room right here. And it's a bit claustrophobic in a way. So, making a project to expand the room was not only easy and accessible because I can really go to the lab here or whatever. I cannot really do videos showing my face, or if I wanted to experiment with facial recognition with masks and all, if I was to go into a lab. And I did have the opportunity of bringing this research to the RDF lab. It's the Robotics and Digital Fabrication Lab at FIU. And they have a bunch of cool tools and robots, and it would be amazing. But at the same time, since this was the thesis project, and it would be my goodbye to FIU and to the house that I lived in while studying at FIU, I wanted to focus the thesis on this room, and it becomes more personal. Not only personal, but this room encompasses everything that I do in my life. I have my desk for work, I have my bed to sleep, I have my TV for chill. So in the same room, there's so many different modes going on. So the idea of using the room is that I have all of these different parts of life: work, sleep, chill, and then start incorporating all of this into one space.
That's pretty interesting. And I thought quarantine would be one major reason for it as well. Okay, there's a very, very, very cool animation that you do with your room, where your room is sort of rotating and it feels like two glass prisms are sort of rotating with it within the video. What software did you create that on?
I did that in Blender, the rotation and all, with the meshes that I got from Photogrammetry, and then I converted the point cloud into meshes, and then I used Blender to do the video animation.
We'll come to photogrammetry as well. I've written questions about that as well. So then you lay the groundwork or the central idea of what you want to do, where you want to collect the data outside, infuse it with a memory, and then send it back to be perceived. All right, so talk to me about this idea of collecting the data outside, infusing it with a memory, and then sending it back in. Talk to me about this idea.
And in a very simple way, as light bounces on objects and hit your retina, it gets converted into electrical signals and sent to the thalamus. And then these electrical signals with the visual information get sent to the primary visual cortex. From there, the information flows mainly two ways: the dorsal stream, processing where things are, the location, position, motion, and the ventral stream, which processes what the objects are. So where and what, almost like Loki and Imaginis. But the interesting thing is that the primary visual cortex is always telling the thalamus what it thinks it sees, polluting the visual stream with preconceived ideas and what it wants to believe. And that is why some scientists are arguing that actually we're not perceiving the world, we're constantly generating it. So if the brain is already augmenting itself with preconceived ideas and memories, how can we then create an external way of processing that information and giving it back to the eye? So a prototype for doing that outside of the brain would be collecting the light before it hits the eye, then processing externally to understand position of things. And when choosing a memory from a dataset, we can then change the perception of objects and return this light to be perceived by the human eyes. If the idea was to augment the perception of reality, and our eyes are receiving the light and processing it, what I mean by doing the process externally is literally receiving the light like our eyes would, with which our camera do, and then processing it for those two things: location and what it is, and then using the memories to modify the interpretation of what the objects are. And then basically what I'll have in the end is a digital twin, a digital space that has the same position of the objects that are in real life, but then with the augmented application of memories into them. And then the idea is, because I do that outside, but I have the same location, I can then align it to the real reality and perceive every object and touch everything in the room as I'm experiencing the augmented version of it. And VR is just the tool that I had in my hands to do this thesis. I truly believe that augmented reality is something like the Microsoft HoloLens. I think those are going to be even more into play as we go into like the future of virtual reality. Because then you're having this mixed reality, the combination of the digital with the real. You can still see everything, but there's a layer or an overlap of the computational input.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about photogrammetry. I'll be honest, I don't know much about it. I am assuming a lot of my viewers don't. So I want you to talk to me about what the process is and what actually goes into it.
Photogrammetry is a bit outdated at this point because now we have LiDAR scans, LiDAR, and they're way faster and more intelligent in how they understand. But the idea of photogrammetry is that you collect a bunch of 2D frames, pictures of you walking through a space, almost like frames of a video. And what the actual software does is, first it's going to align all of these images. So it's going to take image number 1, and then image number 2 is a little bit to the side. It understands the area that they have in common and understands that the new area is a continuation of it. And then it's able to place or assume where the camera was in space based on all of these images. So then after processing everything, it builds a dense point cloud of the position of each point of color in that specific location. And when you zoom out, all of those points together make the 3D model of the space. So in a way, is the conversion of 2D frames into a understanding of 3D, which in a way our brain is constantly doing, especially because we have 2 eyes. So we understand things with 2 perspectives, and our brain constructs the idea of 3D, even though it's a construct. But we are constantly taking these 2D images and processing it to understand depth. So that's why I didn't want to use just LiDAR scans. I wanted to experiment with the photogrammetry in this process of, externalizing a process on the brain.
All right, perfect. I also want to ask, so I mean, are there any special softwares that you can use to then convert those 2D images into point clouds?
A couple of different ones. The best ones that I found are actually free. There's one called Mushroom. I used Agisoft Metashape Pro. It's called Meta. Yeah, if you search Metashape photogrammetry, you'll find it. And it's pretty simple to use.
Okay, so we've set the space, which is the base on which you can now project your memories. And now we've come to the second part of your project, which is about how you modify the space according to a memory. And as I understand it, you take one memory, and that is of your childhood house, which is the Ivy house, which if I'm not wrong, is your parents are also architects, right? Which is designed by them. Yeah. I had seen the stories of your house. It was a very cool house. I especially loved you and your brother's room, which were connected.
Yeah, it's a very special house in my heart. We no longer have it, so it's just in memory now.
Yeah.
And in my thesis project.
All right, so you took that memory and you sort of plugged it to modify the space that you created, the base that you created. You're using that memory to modify that. But to do that, what you do is, if I'm not wrong, you take those images and you gave it to an AI software that gave you text of how that software perceives your images. And then it again gave you images based on those texts. and those images are the ones that you finally embedded onto your final base. But then what I wanted to ask was, why go through this process? Why first convert it into text and then back into images and then use that? Why not use just what you had?
Because there's one simple explanation for this. When you're training a neural network, data is one of the most important things, because you do need a large collection of data set for you to be able to train for a long period of time and have better and better results. And the thing is, if I'm trying to think of a system that is able to capture a moment in its essence and then create a physical space with that, moment specifically, I cannot take 2,000 pictures of the space every time I want to record a memory of it. So the idea of doing this system is with 2 or 3 picture shots, which it could be every time you pick up your phone to check a notification, it records the room that you're in real quick, So that's 1 or 2 shots. And then with that image, it's able to interpret or guess. AI is able to guess what the image is and then creates the prompt. And then with a text to image neural network, you can then use that text to generate thousands of images that do not exist, but it has all of those elements. So in a way, you're building data sets that is not personal. If you're talking about invasion of privacy, or everyone has pictures of my room, maybe it's just getting the fact that you have wooden flooring, white walls, picture frames on the wall, a yellow sofa, and all of those things, but it's not your house. It's images that do not exist. So if I'm sharing my memories, if I then go to the next phase, which is exposing and getting that, this system, in a way, even though it's preliminary, it's questioning how can we impersonalize memories at the same time keeping all the characteristic that makes it perceivable.
I see your point, but also, then it would also depend on how accurate your conversion from one phase to the next is. It might turn out in a way, because when you look at your final output and you look at the memory that you had poured in of your house, it is not exactly the same thing that is being translated. It's a part of it, it's an essence of it, but it's not the exact. The only thing that was going through my mind is this process would sort of morph your original memory into something that might not have been your original memory, and that might come into play as well here.
Yeah, I completely understand, and I do understand that the final outcome is not where it needs to be yet, and I have no, it doesn't hurt my pride saying that. I actually do want to bring it forward, and I know that I couldn't do everything by myself. I'm actually reaching out and networking with people in different fields that are interested in the project, and they would like to collaborate in doing something better, because this is an idea, kind of like a seed, and I really think with actual people who understand neuroscience, or trained in neuroscience, or trained in AI and computer science, then we can start putting all of these efforts into something more solid. So in the end, yes, it wasn't like going back home, right, when I entered the virtual space. And perhaps it's not even something that you would automatically remember. At least in this phase, it feels more like a cognitive cladding. That's the word that I use to explain, because it's, in a way, placing some elements or some characteristics of what AI thought that memory would be into the space that I'm in right now. With better technology and better technical skills, this could have more of a visual connection between both.
All right, now that you have these images, what did you do to sort of infuse your base with that memory, with those images? So what was the next step in the project?
Using the fake rooms of Ivy, I trained Psychogans, which is a neural network, to understand the patterns of what made the fake Ivy perceivable, and then apply those rules to the frames, the 2D frames of the room that I used to create the photogrammetry. So then the result was a collection of frames of the room augmented with the Ivy Then I ran photogrammetry for a second time, but then each frame was augmented. So then it reconstructs the space based on the new frames.
So basically I mean, the 2D frames are the ones that were infused with your IV and not the final model in the first go.
Exactly. So for this, it's actually processing or perceiving each frame, and then as it perceives one frame, when it perceives the other, it completes. It keeps auto-completing itself, and then when I reconstruct the 3D, it's able to put it back. Almost like I laid down the building block, and then I perceive, each view, and then I put it back, so it's a three-dimensional space.
So then we come to finally the step 3, which is your final output, where you also talk about, accessing through the mirror and the tower of memories that you had with the physical space. So talk to me about all that. Explain that final output to me.
One of the big questions was, if you have all of these different versions of the room based on memory, how do you access it, right? You could have, talking about UI and how you actually move from space to space. One thing that I almost took so many different routes, and I have a bunch of sketches. I would be happy to send you some. But the idea of the door first, you enter through the door. So I was transforming my hallway into this metaverse space where when I walked through the hallway, it felt like a catwalk, and it had rooms, like it was a cylindrical tower full of rooms with doors, almost like a Monsters Inc. So I could go to my hallway, but then it looks like it's a huge space full of rooms, and then I could rotate. So like the platform that I'm on in the virtual space rotates. So then when I go to the other room, it feels like I'm going somewhere else, but it's still the same physical path in reality, because as the platform rotates in VR, I'm still standing in the same location. So that's one way that I was going. I ended up choosing the mirror as the point of access because, and that this ties back to philosophy, the whole idea that Descartes talked about. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you see yourself as an object in a field of objects. And, it's this first point of understanding that I'm just one more thing in this earth. And mirrors are crazy. Like, I don't know. Looking through a mirror is seeing the same space that you are in right now, but you're seeing from a different perspective that you would never see. And even if you try to do photogrammetry in a space that has a mirror, when you run the 3D, it's gonna create the other side of the room because it understands space. It's just a continuation of space. It's almost like a window into a different version of the room. So I wanted to play with that and use the mirror as the gateways so you could explore the different realities and access. So finally, the step 3 is reconstructing the 3D model based on this augmented perception, then aligning again with the physical space so we can create variations of how we interpret and experience the environment around us. And once we have enough variations, we can use mirrors as portals to access and explore the different realities, because mirrors are already a way of viewing the world from a different perspective. And we can transform the 4 walls of this room into a tower of multiple levels of spaces that we can explore.
So now that we've come to your final output, we've sort of discussed where you started from, your room that you chose, why you chose that. We went through your thought process, your ideas, everything. Now let's talk about the technical aspects of it. I want to understand first of all, the softwares that you used, to sort of push you through each step into the next. So what were the software that you had chosen for this project?
Let me break down into parts. So of course, for photogrammetry or image reconstruction into 3D, I used Metashape for collecting the 2D frames, converting to point clouds. I used Cloud Compare, which is a free software for just cleaning up. Sometimes points are in random places, so cleaning up the point cloud in Cloud Compare. And Blender for cleaning up as well. I used Unity, I think the most, for visualization and for incorporating the VR perspectives and aligning the camera positions with the real reality. And then Blender for a couple of the renderings. But then the augmented perception part, the actual artificial intelligence used, I used 3 main models. So one of them is Seeing AI, which is developed by Microsoft for blind people, actually. It's an application that anyone could get, and it's able to, from an image of a scene, give a text voice description of what it is. So let's say I send you a picture of my weekend and, you know, you're blind, you can just use this application and, you know, get it described what it is. So that's one for the text. And then for converting text into images, I used a lot of different models, but mostly Clip by OpenAI. And OpenAI is huge, it's growing so fast, and they're developing a bunch of different neural networks and releasing. And Clip was released, I believe, last year, and they released DALL-E this year. I experimented with DALL-E as well, and it's crazy. And then the last neural network that I used for the final prototype was Psychogans, which is the one that I can then take the images of the room, images of the fake room, and then blend the characteristics.
Now, the final output for your whole project was a video, right? Was it the same that the video that we have seen, or was it a different one?
It was a bit different. It was mostly the same, but I had to present live. And my presentation was around 10 minutes. The video ended up being 5 minutes or so, 5 minutes and something. But it was extremely difficult to play. If you saw the video, the animations, like each slide is animated with the infographics. And so for me to present it live, I didn't want to present as a video, because if I couldn't finish saying what I wanted to say, then the video would carry on and it would get lost. So what I did is, it's a collection of 30 slides on PowerPoint, and I made each of the videos as a GIF, and each of the GIFs is positioned in a specific way. So if I go too far and it goes back, it doesn't really look like it replayed the GIF. It was complex to do it. But yeah, the whole idea was to be an effortless presentation, and it didn't feel like a PowerPoint presentation, because I knew that it was a really hard concept to explain to a bunch of people that are not familiar with the subject. So how do you actually go on and, you know, take them by the hand, explain what you mean? And even then, you know, my mom still doesn't understand my project. She just believes, like, okay, I'm sure you did something great, but like, I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard thing, because in architecture, a lot of people are open to new ideas, but a lot of juries are not that much, you know. So going to the presentation, I wasn't sure which type of jury I was going to encounter and how the presentation was going to be at all. So I try to play both worlds, you know, say things that are, if you understand the subject, you understand what I'm using, but at the same time, if you don't understand anything at all, you could perhaps understand where I'm going with this. And that was my biggest problem all semester. Literally up to my presentation, every time I presented to my professor and the assistant professor, Neil Leach and Marina, they would always tell me, okay, you got it, but like, you need to make this understandable. You need to, they really couldn't understand exactly up to the presentation day what I was doing.
This was one thing I was about to ask. Like did the jurors completely follow what you were sort of trying to say with the project?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, luckily I had a really good collection of critics. Many people who are part of the Digital Futures. Do you know Digital Futures? So Digital Futures is an initiative to bring computational design and art education. It's honestly great, and it's completely free. It's all on YouTube. Every Saturday there's a video, alive actually, and a lot of big people have been there, like Patrick Schumacher from Zaha, and Rafiq Anadol has been there with the artist that I mentioned before. And it's a great platform.
Also, you were only given 10 minutes to present, right? Were you able to get everything in, like everything that you wanted to display there, and let them know things? Because 10 minutes is a short time to present any project, especially something as complex as yours.
The answer is definitely no. I have so much exploration things, because it was a year of exploring and doing tests, and every week I would have 30 slides to present. So I have, weeks and weeks of 30 slides. I have a lot of documentation, but the thing is, the more you show of exploring and different things, looking at this, trying this, now this, the line of process, the actual trajectory starts getting blurry. You don't know, okay, where are you going with this? So in a way, having the time constraint helped me at least building try to be a little bit more solid timeline of where I'm going. But I intend on posting everything that I've done, because it's crazy.
So also, during your crits, I mean, do the people who are there, who are supposed to look at your design, do they, is it just you present and that is it? Or do they sort of talk to you about it and maybe give their crits at the end on your project? Was it that way, or was it just a presentation?
Usually at FIU, how it works is you present, and then the crit gives a response, and sometimes asks you a question. And then that's it, you carry on. You either cry or you go celebrate. But during the thesis, at least in my section, my class presenting, it was extremely interesting because we presented, and then the crits went on having a discussion about it and asking questions to you. And the questions were extremely intelligent, really, like, they weren't because they were curious to know. It was like testing, not only your knowledge on the subject, because you clearly presented and, they understand that, but what are your views on what your knowledge could do to the world, So they were really interesting questions, and I do have recorded the actual presentation with the crits, and I'll share it at some point. A neuroscientist called Neil Seth talks about the predictive perception and how we're not actually perceiving the world, we're constantly generating it, meaning that we're constantly guessing and giving our interpretation of things are, and nothing that we see is actually how we see it, If I have this system implemented and then I go to the street and I meet someone, what if the person could see the way that I'm seeing, and I can see the way that they are seeing, and it blends? What if social interaction becomes a mix of the two perceptions, the two memories, with the two biofeedback live telling how the two people are feeling? And now that we have all of these technological tools that are going to revolutionize how we do anything, why can't architecture start, exploring those things? And I'm not the first one, and I'm not the best one. I think, posting videos on TikTok and all, people think that I'm coming from a place of authority. No, I'm coming from a place of exploration.
All right. I think that concludes everything that I had in mind. But yeah, thank you for taking out the time to do this, and thank you for answering all of my questions.
No, thank you. This was great, and I hope we can do more videos in the future. Maybe you'll be in one of my TikToks next.
I can't post more stuff on Insta. My TikTok is banned in India, so we can't see TikTok.
We'll make it reels then.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Matheus. Thank you for taking out the time.
Thank you.
And that was it, you guys. The very first episode of Thesis Showcase. How did you like this episode? I really want to know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know everything, thoughts about his project, his ideas, about the series as a whole. And also, if you're interested, you can find more information about how to contact Matheus in the description below. You can also find the extended version of this conversation on Patreon. And if you wish to support this channel by becoming a patron through Patreon, you can find the link for that in the description below as well. That was it. Do not forget to give this video a thumbs up, to share this video, and to subscribe to BlessedArch. I will see you guys soon with more such content. Bye bye.